Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 320. I'm your host, Paul Reichoff. Happy Valentine's Day. This is no time for flowers and chocolate, but it is definitely a time to stay vigilant. Radical, disqualified, and unqualified nominee for Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed. Elon Musk is ransacking our government. The FBI is going through a purge. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have totally abandoned Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin is being invited to Washington. What a great time for our enemies, because just about every door is wide open for them now. And Vladimir Putin must be smiling from ear to ear. I think we really need that upside down American flag emoji on all our apps right about now, because stakes is definitely high, and we've got to stay vigilant now more than ever before. So the U.S. Senate has voted to confirm Tulsi Gabbard as a Director of National Intelligence, a person who was an independent a couple months ago and a Democrat just a few years ago, and a guest on this show a few years ago. But that was a very different time, and that was a very different Tulsi Gabbard. And only one Republican showed the courage to break ranks with their party and vote no. And who was it? Of all people, Republican from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, who seems to be doing two things just about daily: voting with his conscience for patriotism and in defense of American democracy, and falling down because he's like 85 years old and seems to have health issues almost every day. But it's a shameful time in America where only one Republican stands with patriotism and for courage and in defense of our national security, our democracy, and our integrity. And the rest just fall in line. Because the Trump steamroller is rolling, and it's picking up steam. And now it's got Ukraine in its path. While Hegseth had his first meeting with NATO leaders in Europe, Trump called Putin on the phone for their first official conversation. This is just hours after American teacher Mark Fogel was released from a Russian prison where he'd been held for years. Great news anytime an American is released, and kudos to the president for making that happen. However, when Fogel landed at the White House and did his late night press event with Trump, they thanked Vladimir Putin. They made it sound like Vladimir Putin was an ally, like he was a reasonable diplomat, like he wasn't a criminal who's been waging an unsanctioned war against a sovereign nation for 3+ years. But the world was watching, and we needed Trump and Hegseth to stand strong with Ukraine, to show the strong support that exists for Ukraine across all partisan backgrounds, and especially among the veterans community. It's part of why I stood with Bonnie Carroll, Adrian Bronnenberger, and others to launch American Veterans for Ukraine last summer. We wanted to show America and the world how many veterans stand with Ukraine, because we number in the millions. Unfortunately, that doesn't include fellow veteran Pete Hegseth, who continues to undermine Ukraine, echo Putin talking points, and abandon Ukraine just about fully in this most critical time. Every message they send must have Putin smiling and our enemies celebrating. So we're abandoning Ukraine. Our FBI is going through a purge and is under attack from our commander-in-chief and the soon-to-likely-be director, radical extremist Kash Patel. Trump has entirely gutted USAID, neutering our soft power around the globe and abandoning many allies and friends around the globe who are experiencing hardship and turmoil. And all across the globe, with every move he makes, our enemies are celebrating. Whether it's recklessly threatening our hard power against allies like Mexico and Canada, or entirely removing our soft power in places like USAID, America is growing weaker by the day, and our enemies are celebrating. And so, I'm not getting you any chocolate or candy, I'm sorry, but I am going to get you for this Valentine's Day my top topics. Hegseth and Trump aren't just firing shots at our allies in Ukraine, they're also firing shots against most of the democratic guardrails that exist in our country, and especially taking fire again on the press. Late Friday night, the Pentagon announced it was rotating out the press desks for a number of respected media outlets and replacing them with sham partisan propaganda organizations. So out are the New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CNN, Politico, The Hill, The War Zone, and NPR. In the New York Post, Washington Examiner, OWN, Newsmax, HuffPost, The Free Press, The Daily Caller, and Breitbart. This included the desk of a frequent guest on this show, one of the best national security reporters in the country, Dan Lamothe of the Washington Post. And Dan wrote this on X. Yes, the desk I share with Alex Horton and Missy Ryan is one of those affected here. The Washington Post got targeted. Now, Dan Lamothe is one of the best reporters in the world. Missy Ryan and Alex Horton are also excellent. And Horton is one of the few defense journalists that's a post 9/11 veteran himself. So it makes sense that Hegseth would want to go after them because they're very good at their jobs. And the march to shut down opposition and voices of challenge or dissent continued this week when the White House banned the AP from an event at the White House, when the AP refused to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. This is exactly what authoritarians do. And this is what it looks like as Trump's strategy to consolidate and deepen his propaganda message continues to unfold across the Pentagon, across the White House, and all across America. Now, these are just the top topics that you may have heard about. But in the midst of all the flurry, in the midst of all of what Trump is doing that Steve Bannon once called flooding the zone, there are a number of other important stories that you might have missed. Stories that need to stay on your radar. Way below the radar, at the end of last week, when a lot of folks were checking out and getting ready for the Super Bowl, the Department of Defense announced they were doing something extremely radical, banning books at Department of Defense schools. Did you see that one? Again, our friend Dan Lamothe at the Washington Post had the story, and he wrote, "The Defense Department has begun restricting access to books and learning materials covering subjects from immigration to psychology in its school system serving U.S. military families, citing the Trump administration's crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs." If you don't know, the Department of Defense Education Activity Group serves about 67,000 students spread across 160 schools on military installations around the globe. These are American kids in American schools, and they're having their books banned. I've warned that Trump's culture war is going to start and be led by the Pentagon. And everything they want to do in America will happen at the Pentagon and Department of Defense first. So keep your eye on this topic, because the banning of books is starting at the Pentagon, but coming soon to a school near you. Also below the radar, military.com and very few others are reporting that veterans' unemployment spiked in the month of January by a full point to 4.2%. Now, this should be alarming to anyone because the national unemployment rate's around 4%, and folks in the military usually pre-screen for drug use, for mental health issues, and in general, people like to hire vets. So it's already up a full percentage point in just 1 month, and that was for January. Keep in mind, 30% of all federal workers are veterans, and Trump just pushed out about 1% and climbing of all federal workers. So what do you think the unemployment rate for veterans is going to look like for February and March? Don't let this one fall off your radar. Stay vigilant. Also below the radar, you may have heard that Trump and Musk and his crew are also targeting the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a mouthful. But it's a watchdog group that's been looking out for the little guy and gal for years, since its founding over a decade ago. What you may also not know is that the CFPB has been fighting for veterans from the beginning. They've been protecting us from predatory lenders. They've been protecting us from predatory for-profit schools. Has always had the backs of veterans, and for years was actually led by Holly Petraeus, wife of General David Petraeus. But the CFPB has always had the backs of veterans, often when nobody else has. So when you hear them gutting this obscure agency you've never heard of, look a little deeper and you'll find out the truth. The CFPB has had the backs of our veterans and lots of other little guys and gals around the country. And that needs to be more widely known and appreciated. Now, almost every week I have a segment that I call The Democrats Won't Save You. As you well know, I am a ferocious independent, and I think that neither party will save us from this disastrous course we're on right now. The future is in the hands of the American people. The future is in the hands of people like you. The future is especially in the hands of independents. But it is definitely not going to be the Democrats that save the day. Look no further than former populist, seemingly almost independent-minded John Fetterman, Democrat senator from Pennsylvania. Last week, Fetterman voted yes on radical nominee for Attorney General Pam Bondi, the only Democrat to do so. Fetterman also voted for Doug Collins for Secretary of Veterans Affairs, along with about half of the Democrats, even though Collins is an election denier and a radical anti-abortion activist. But Fetterman continues to break ranks with the Democrats, even going so far as to kind of support Trump's radical plan to turn Gaza into a golf course for the Palestinians.
I described it as provocative, and it is provocative, but I don't think that that's really in an actual serious kind of a way. But what I think it was more to kind of shake things up and to get to start a very more honest conversation of Gaza.
Now, in my view, Fetterman's never been a serious leader. Fetterman is like the new Kirsten Sinema, but worse. I just hope he doesn't go independent. Because the last thing we need is another Democrat leaving his party and giving all of us real independents a bad name. The Democrats won't save you. Every day, every minute, we see more and more why that's true. And it was exceptionally true if you check out the words of Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House.
I'm trying to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
They are a total failure. They failed in the election. They're failing now to hold Trump accountable. They failed in the impeachment. They fail over and over again, yet people continue to give Democrats their money, their name, their time. But there's a total failure of imagination. There's a total failure to plan. There's a total failure to communicate. There's a total failure to lead, a total failure to deliver, and in the end, a failure to protect our democracy. No, my friends, the Democrats will not save you. So declare your independence now and stop doubling down on failure. Democrats could actually learn from the Republicans. Do you know who Tom Coburn was? Tom Coburn was a longtime Republican senator who was called Dr. No, famously because he would put a hold on all kinds of otherwise sensible legislation, including benefits for 9/11 first responders and the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention Act for veterans that I once led the fight for back in 2010. But Tom Coburn single-handedly would stop otherwise sensible legislation. Democrats, Google Tom Coburn, Dr. No, and tell us which one of you will be the new Dr. No for 2025. Because you got to come up with something, because nothing you're doing right now is even coming close to working. Because Republicans are smashing your asses harder than the Eagles did the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And they even showed it again the day after the Super Bowl. The day after the Super Bowl, Republican Governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, named his new lieutenant governor. And guess who it was? Do you know? National championship football coach Jim Tressel, who coached Ohio State. This is the type of candidate that the Republicans continue to put forward. People who are trusted, people who are winners, people who are popular across all kinds of partisan lines. And now, Jim Tressel, much like Tommy Tuberville, is on the fast track to leadership in the Republican Party. The week after the Super Bowl, the Republicans called a play they've called before, picking former football coaches to be political leaders. They keep calling that play because it works. And they're going to keep calling it until the Democrats can stop it or counter it. And I'm sorry, I like him, but Tim Walz does not count. Being a defensive coordinator on a high school football team is not the same as being the two-time national championship at Ohio State. The Democrats will not save you in 2026 or especially in this year. But this year, in the next few months, there is hope because our independent movement continues to grow. And there are elections happening this fall in places around the country, especially some high-profile mayoral races, like the mayor of Omaha, Nebraska, the mayor of Buffalo, New York, and of course, the mayor of New York City. And after launching Independent Veterans of America last year on July 4th, Independence Day, as you know if you're a regular watcher or listener of this show, we are continuing to grow and evolve at Independent Veterans of America and launching a campaign called 25 in 25. We're looking for 25 independent veteran leaders to run this year in 2025. We're looking for you. We want to find you. We want to support you. And we want to help you get elected and bring some moderate, reasonable, patriotic, nonpartisan leadership to this year in American politics. So if you're an independent veteran that's thinking about running from U.S. Senate to school board, or you're a person who just wants to support those men and women who do, go to independentveteransofamerica.org right now. It's linked here in the show notes. Navy veteran Dan Osborn in Nebraska was just the start. We're continuing to carry the torch forward and driving a new generation of leaders that America can trust. So leave the herds and join the pack. And if you want further proof that the Democrats won't save you, look here in New York City at the failed, corrupt Mayor Eric Adams, who continues to be one of the most openly corrupt politicians in America. After flying down to Mar-a-Lago and going to inauguration and kissing Trump's ass, Adams found out this week that the Department of Justice has directed prosecutors to drop the corruption case against Mayor Adams, which is disgusting on so many levels. In 2025, corruption pays. More and more by the day. Kiss the ring and you get a pass. But most New York City voters won't give Adams a pass. He's up for re-election this fall. And I don't think he's going to win. So he will be out. The people will speak. And one way or another, this failure will finally come to an end. And maybe it'll be an independent that takes him out. Watch this space. Also in New York this week and worthy of your attention, Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman endorsed Zelnor Myrie in the New York City mayoral races. Myrie is a progressive state senator from here in New York City who no one's ever heard of and will not win this race. Now, few people in New York City even saw this, especially where I live, in his district. But it was on Morning Joe, and there was a press conference that was covered a little bit by some local New York media. Here's why this is important far beyond New York City. Because liberals are losing traction by the day, nationwide, and even in places like New York City. Now, Congressman Goldman is very rich, and he can definitely help this candidate with fundraising and even his own money. But Myrie, like many other candidates in this crowded field of liberals, will struggle to catch fire. New York City is exhausted by liberals and by Democrats and by empty promises and by the wokeism, and the landscape remains wide open for someone who is new, authentic, tough, and independent. So if you're an independent and you want to run for mayor of New York City, hit us up. I'd love to have you as a guest on this show. And coming up next, we have a special guest to help us break down all of this. One of my favorite people in the political and real world, because he is a very real guy. I've been honored to call him a mentor in my life for over 20 years. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's a Medal of Honor recipient, the former governor and senator of the great state of Nebraska. The great Bob Kerrey is finally joining us here on Independent Americans. I've known Bob for over 20 years, and he's a man who talks real. He's a man who talks tough, and he's a man who cares deeply about his country. He gave part of his foot for his country, and he continues to serve now. He's a true maverick who's always spoken his mind throughout his political career. He ran for president. And last year, he went against his party and endorsed Dan Osborn, the independent, for Senate in Nebraska. He's a strong supporter of our independent movement and a wise and thoughtful and candid voice that we need to hear from, especially right now. So coming up, a very real and candid conversation with the great American hero, Bob Kerrey. Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, we have a very special, timely, inspiring, important, profound guest.
Holy cow. Who is it?
It's true. You're going to love this guy. He's one of my truly favorite Americans, a man I've been honored to have as a friend and a mentor for 2 decades now, a true American hero and a voice of conscience in a time like now that is needed so much. The great and powerful Bob Kerrey is finally joining us on Independent Americans. Welcome, sir.
Pay no attention to the man behind the screen.
So you're a Medal of Honor recipient.
Yes.
You're a former governor and you're a former senator.
Yes.
What do we call you? Do we call you governor, senator?
Here's to answer that question, I need to ask you a question.
Yes.
Are you a maitre d' in any restaurant in New York that I'm trying to get into?
No.
So my name is Bob.
Which one works better, governor or senator?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I think it's a rabbit hole I've never wanted to go down.
And if you were to wear the Medal of Honor, you would get salutes, but I'm not sure it would help you get into any places here in New York.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Any place was a large fraction of patriotic immigrants, they would. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you
Sure.
for making the time. I'm going to ask you, Bob, a question I ask everyone. The first question, where are you and how are you?
I am sitting in a wheelchair in my apartment in Lower Manhattan in New York City. Just returned from Memorial Sloan Kettering, where I got the green light. I'm going to have surgery, hopefully my last surgery on my leg, the 24th of February.
We've been talking throughout this process. If you're comfortable sharing, can you explain to folks what you're going through? Because you are.
Well, the short version is it's basically a dental implant for my leg. The problem is that you don't walk on your teeth, so it's a little harder to make it work. There's 2 surgeries. I had 2 surgeries at Walter Reed. The lead guy got recruited by Penn. His deputy came up to MSK, and unfortunately, the pin broke loose. So I had to make a decision on 3/4 of the way across the lake. Do I want to turn around and swim back? And so I've had to. I'm well on the way to having this process done, and it enabled me to stand without pain, to do lots of things that I couldn't do before. And it all came about as a consequence of something you worked on, which is a community cares program at the VA. It's thanks to socialism, I don't have to pay for anything.
Well, for folks that don't know, I'm going to link to your Medal of Honor citation and bio in the show notes. But this is from an injury, a wound you suffered in Vietnam, right? Going all the way back to then.
Yes.
And
unfortunately for me, I don't know if you ever did this. When you're in a firing position, my favorite firing position was a hurdler with my legs sticking out over a rock, and it didn't last long after some explosion landed close to us. So that's the short end of that story.
I think it's important too, because I've got so many friends and mentors that are Vietnam vets that are in a phase where you are, where you're still dealing with the wounds, but you've also got these modern advances. So you told me, we were talking the other day, you told me about when you ran a marathon once.
Oh man, that was brutal. So 1981 was actually just a couple of years after. An old orthopedic surgeon, is probably 20 years younger than I am right now, at the VA in Lincoln, Nebraska, persuaded me to have surgery on my leg. It was scarred. And he said, I got to take those scars off. He did. And I was able to start running. And I ran a marathon in Lincoln, Nebraska, the ever famous flat marathon, Lincoln, Nebraska. But I was running basically on a wooden leg with woolen socks. And every 5 or 6 miles, I had to sit down and make the other runners puke by taking that bloody sock off and putting another one on. And the last 6 miles, not because of the pain, I was thinking, Jesus, I could be home watching the news. This is dumb. I never ran another one.
Well, there's so much in that story that is a testament to who you are. You weren't yet governor, right? This was before you were governor.
Yeah, I ran for governor later that year.
And I think you were known as being a candid, straight talking person. You were a Democrat, but I don't know if you came home to Nebraska nowadays, if you'd end up as a Democrat or you'd be somewhere else. You've been really supportive of independents like Dan Osborn and others. But the reason why I was so excited to have you on the show now is because I think you're just a voice of reason, and not just the Democrats, I think, have lost their minds in some way. The Republicans have lost their minds. So let me ask you to kind of kick it off, Bob, building on what we talked about in the phone call the other day. What do you make of this situation where we are in America right now?
Terrible. It's a terrible situation. I question whether the president believes in anything other than his popularity and his numbers. And he's handed the keys of government over to the world's richest person who knows even less than he does. And we talked about this earlier, but somebody asked me about efficiency in government. And I said, let me point out something. Heroism is not efficient. There's nothing efficient about saving somebody's life. If you want to be efficient, let them die. That's efficient. But if you fly in, if you run in, if you try to save somebody's life, it's massively inefficient. And of course, Elon never has done anything like that. So I think it's a terrible use of a word to try to do things that, frankly, he's just massively ignorant. I watched this terrible press conference. 30 minutes he talked on while the blonde president sat next to him, looking up from the resolute desk in the Oval Office, and Elon is just rambling. He discovered, he said, that there are government employees who get wealthy on the job. And he said, did you look at the guy at the desk? Have you looked in a mirror lately, Elon? That's how you got wealthy. Can I swear on this thing?
Yeah, you can swear all you want. Yeah.
Hey, what a dumb fuck. He's not self-aware at all that he's become wealthy because of the government. And the guy sitting at the desk is making, and it just, I discovered that people who work for the government sometimes get wealthy. Jesus. The last person on earth that I would ask to identify inefficiency in the federal government would be Elon fucking Musk. That's how I feel about it.
You're going to need to come on for an hour every week. I've been telling you this for like 5 years. You've been a supporter of this show and this company since we started. And I don't think you're going to escape the need for people to hear your thoughts on all this stuff.
But I admire anybody today, Republican or Democrat, who crosses the line and says, I'm going to run for office. I'm going to serve in that capacity. I left the Senate with great admiration for democracy, and I still have admiration for it. But it's hard. It's really hard. And you got to be able to get in a critical debate where you can raise your voice. Elon's got 150 million people following him, and there's no accountability. He lies all the time to them. He says, the Democrats are bringing in immigrants so they can vote in California. What the fuck are you talking about? They can't vote in California, you nitwit. And he's always doing it. And it doesn't work in a populist environment. And I'm almost anti-populism, left or right. In a populist environment, you got to look for somebody to blame. You got to look for somebody to say, that's why I'm unhappy today. Happiness is a choice. And I make that choice every single day as a consequence of, winning the ovarian lottery, as Warren Buffett likes to say. On the 27th of August, 1943, I was born into a great family. And they never disappointed me.
There's so much good in what you just said. Let me ask you to turn your eyes over to defense, which is right now front and center. I just finished. I'm recording this from Colin McShane's office at News Nation, where I just went on and debated a guy who hosts a show called the Bearded Federalist podcast, and he said that Ukraine is taking all our money, right? The propaganda talking points, and I'm pushing back against that. But in this moment, Hegseth has said, Ukraine shouldn't be in NATO. Trump is normalizing Putin, and they're shifting hard into everything from Gaza to Ukraine with the same kind of dystopian approach. But can you break down Hegseth specifically? You know Defense Department, national security, foreign policy. Those are your areas of expertise. But can you talk about Hegseth and now Tulsi Gabbard, who was just confirmed with only one Republican voting against her, Mitch McConnell? Can you talk about those two in particular and how dangerous it is to have them in those jobs?
Well, I feel some responsibility. I was on the 9/11 Commission, and I helped write the law that created the NDI or whatever the hell they call them now. And she's just not qualified for that job. And they're just They're afraid of Trump, and they're afraid of Elon, and they're just falling in line. And Hegseth, I mean, I met him once when I was on Fox, and he seemed like an altogether likable guy. But his book, American Crusade, written in 2024, this is not a dalliance that he had when he was a freshman in college. This is something he wrote last year. First of all, why would you use that title? We don't need a crusade. That's not what we need. And in the story, and he says, we're at war. I mean, when I got into politics, by the way, I knew almost nothing when I ran for office. I was massively ignorant. And the further I get away from my time in politics, and I see these moments where I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And it's a big problem. Fortunately for me, I had parents who made certain that I used doubt all the time when I'm examining any question, because maybe I'm wrong. There's two possibilities that when I get excited about something, I'm either right or I'm wrong. And in that book, back in the good old days when I first ran, the Republicans called me a communist. I could deal with that. I go, well, I'd kill if you were in Vietnam. But you can make an economic argument and get. Now I'm the devil. Now it's religious. Now I'm seen as dangerous Democrat Bob K, radical. I mean, the language that these guys are using, especially President Trump, it's and what Hegseth says in that book is our military and our police force have to decide which side are you on. That's his language. Which side are you on? This is a guy who believes that our policemen and our military need to choose to be on his side, political side, fighting against demons like me. It's wrong. If I had an 18-year-old son today, I'm not, and he says, I'm not sure I'd advise him to go into the United States Navy, which was one of the most important experiences of my life. I love the Navy, and and love the Army, by the way. I love the military. But my God, we have a Secretary of Defense who thinks I have to choose what side am I on? I'm on one side. I'm on America's side. I'm not choosing a Civil War advocate. No, he's not explaining who he's defending. And is it dangerous? Yeah, it can become dangerous if you actually start to believe that we need to have a civil war. Many of the guys are talking about civil war. I mean, I think, okay, as long as I don't have a Secretary of Defense that's signing up people to fight that civil war, I don't worry about it, because the National Guard could shut down the Proud Boys in about 20 seconds. So it's not I don't worry about it until I start hearing people like now Secretary Hegseth talk about we have a political war going on and our military and our police force have to choose sides. They don't. That's the beauty of our system.
Well, it is a crusade for him. I mean, he's a culture warrior who is waging the culture war on the Pentagon and then wants to use the Pentagon to wage that culture war on the rest of the country. I mean, they're starting with the Pentagon because it's powerful, because it's influential, because it's big, because it's got the guns, and they've got the perfect guy in Hegseth. I mean, he was built for this moment. But let me ask you specifically, Bob, to talk about where the Democrats are, because the Republicans are on the offensive. Trump's running up the score now. I mean, he's getting every single win. He's got Gabbard, maybe probably going to get Patel too. He got Pam Bondi. You have been a strategist for the Democrats for a long time. You were. I wish they would listen to you now, that you have more clarity than I've heard from all Democrats combined in the last 5 years. But if you were advising them strategically, how do they defend against what's happening right now?
First of all, it's very easy to have moral clarity when you have the word former in front of your title. It's not.
Well, you had it when you were current too.
Oh, I don't know, but every single day of my political time in office, all 16 years, was before Google, before Facebook, before this. This is 2006 or 7. So politics is much, much different today. It's why Elon Musk was able to help Trump win, because he's got 140 million people. And, Ron Wyden put this amendment on a bill called the Communication Decency Act that was intended to reduce pornography. And what did it do? Just the opposite. And because, so it's a different world. I don't pretend. I don't. If somebody calls and asks for my support, I said, glad. He said, what do you think I ought to do? I'm not going to give you advice. I'm still a Democrat, and I know why I'm a Democrat. And I don't think we're in trouble. We lost an election. We haven't been devastated by it. And the question is going to be, how many Americans really like the idea of hiring the richest person in the world, giving him complete immunity? He lies when he said it's transparent. There's no transparency in what Elon Musk is doing. There's no FOIA request that you can submit to find out if he's got conflicts in the contracts that he's got and the investigations going on against him. If Americans like that, I wonder how they're going to feel. The Democrats get in power and we get George Soros to come into the White House and find inefficiency. They'd hate it. So maybe if the American people love this, it's going to be hard. I don't think they will. I think they're going to prefer. We got our shorts in a bunch over identity and all kinds of stuff that I think is sort of important. It's not unimportant, but what really mattered to Americans, I can't pay my healthcare bills. I can't pay for tuition. My rent just got jacked up. I've got Elon Musk around using AI to eliminate every fucking job in the world. That doesn't bother him at all. So people are anxious, and they're not anxious about their identity. They're not anxious about anything other than their economic status. So I don't think they've got and I think, by the way, this idea that we're going to become more energy dependent by drill everywhere. Even the energy companies don't want that. Even they don't regard the energy of the sun to be a problem, or the energy of wind to be a problem. At all. And so you're going to see a lot of unraveling going on as they try, and maybe they're going to succeed in repealing the poorly named Inflation Reduction Act. So I think just relax. I've read way too many editorials.
Can I ask you though,
this is what the Democrat, if they only had done this, if Kamala had only had whatever, I mean, we lost.
But I know you don't want to give advice, but you just gave really good examples, if not advice, on how how Democrats or anyone could talk about these moments. And, you are still a Democrat. I know why, because I've spoken to you, but maybe I'd ask you to explain to folks maybe who are younger, right? Why are you a Democrat? Why do you believe in that as a method for change and advancement in this country? And then who do you view as a leader? Because you're embodying what the Democrats lack. You're talking plain about the right issues. Who do you see as hope for this party?
On this day, first of all, don't quit. Stay in the game. Jesus. The last thing I want to do is get in an argument with somebody who's get tears in their eyes because I raised my voice. Jeez, come on. Freedom isn't free, we're told every Memorial Day, all of us who served. Well, what are you talking about? What's not free about it? That's nothing to do with the military. It has everything to do with the difficulty living in a free society where the correlation between effort and results. And if you're running around looking for somebody to blame, you got a problem. So I'm a Democrat because I'm a free market capitalist, knowing that the market can't do a lot of things. It was the Veterans Administration that saved my life. It was a Navy hospital that saved my life. It wasn't some efficient thing that Elon Musk runs. It was an inefficient operation, that VA. It's still it's very inefficient, but it saved my life. I had a tornado hit. My brother-in-law and I were in business in '73. We had a tornado come through there and blow the business away. It almost killed us. You know who helped us put it back together? The Small Business Administration. The mayor asked for a declaration of disaster. A Republican governor at the time, Gerald Ford, declared it a disaster, and we put our lives back together. So at the same time, I get these regulators coming in all the time with putting thermometers up my ass, trying to make certain that I'm doing everything they want me to do. It's not like we're talking about the Pentagon. I think it was actually I can't remember who said it, but they said the Pentagon ought to be a triangle. So I don't, it's a really great metaphor. It is massively overstaffed, and so looking for ways to make that operation smaller. But guess what, Mr. Secretary? You know who carries the day in our wars today? It's the guys hauling your bony ass over to the conflict, and the tractors and the trailers and everything you need to fight that war. It's logistics that makes us formidable. Now, if you're only going to fight wars inside the United States, that's a different problem. But logistics is what carries the day. And by the way, I don't need a warrior today. I need a man or woman that knows how to run a drone. That's tomorrow's war. I'm looking for nerds. You nerds, I want the nerds to sign up for the United States Navy. I remember talking
I
to
love this. This is
I
like,
remember
this is a
talking. I remember
t-shirt,
talking
Bob.
to the commanding officer of Navy Special Warfare Group, Wyman Howard, who's retired. He
I know.
probably doesn't like that I'm
I know,
outing
Wyman.
him in
Yep.
this. So I asked Wyman, "How about women in SEAL team?" Of course, he said. He said, "I don't know if you know this or not, Bob, but women can see and hear shit that we can't see and hear. And if you're running an op, that's what you need. It gives you 360 degrees. We've only got about 180 degrees of vision and hearing." He said they don't need to do pull-ups. They don't need to run the obstacle course. They need to hear and see shit that I can't hear and see. So it's this warrior class idea. It's nuts. That's
This is
not.
really important, Bob. I want to put you on this
Yeah.
because there's a real like almost crisis of what toughness is in this country, right? And you've got somebody like Hegseth who's very performative. He was out there doing PT and he talks about how many push-ups he's doing. And you are a Medal of Honor recipient. You lost part of your leg. There's a Navy ship that's going to be named after you that's coming online that I want to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts on that. But can you talk about this toughness issue? Because I think that's where the Democrats are losing, right? They look weak, they look wimpy, they look like they're quibbling, they look like they're over explaining. But you
I don't think.
are a harken
I
back
don't,
to what Democrats used to sound like. You ran
yeah.
for president. So can you talk about what it means to be really tough in this country right now?
Well, I think we went way too far in identifying things that we men do as being bad. You know, I've got to a point where you see something that my maleness that offends you, go fuck yourself. I don't, I don't, I don't. It's not like I don't try to be a. People, boy, be careful, Bob. He's a SEAL. I'm not a SEAL. I'm a former SEAL. Back in the late 1960s, when you're young and foolish, you can do all kinds of things you wouldn't dare trying to do now. So I think we've way overreacted to what it means to be male. We like football, we like hunting, we like all kinds of we like strip shows. I mean, it's nuts, but that's who we are. But if you look at the 10,000-year history, last 10,000 years, what you have is women inventing agriculture about 10,000 years ago. They put us out of work. And we've had 10,000 years of writing laws and establishing procedures that protect our species from the instinct of men to want to kill each other. That's who we are. So I object to being identified as a male and that being a problem, but I don't resist the idea that we need a little restraint.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is why my phone calls with Bob Kerrey are my favorite moments of any time. Now you're getting an insight into all of the wisdom and candor and no shit-ism that is Bob Kerrey. Let me ask you, Bob, you did something unusual in the spring of last year or summer of last year. You endorsed Dan Osborn, who ran for Senate in your home state. You've been very supportive of all the work I've been doing for independent media and independent candidates and independent veterans. And you really went out there to fight for Dan Osborn. Can you talk about why and what you think Dan was tapping into that seems to be so difficult for especially Democrats to tap into? Why did you go out and support an independent instead of a Democrat in your home state?
Well, first of all of us who have run for office have one. I think they're going to discover a gene code that makes us about 25% more delusional than everybody else. And all of us are delusional. That's how we survive, you
Hmm.
know. What we do when we're standing on the stump talking to people say, I grew up poor. There were 9 kids in our family, and my mom did all this shit all by herself. And once, I could change the oil on a car, working. Dan isn't past tense. Dan's a machinist now.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he not only does he know what it's like to go to work, what it's like to be a part of a union in Omaha, Nebraska, and win a union fight against management. Unfortunately, they left. The company did, but it's not a theory for him; it's a practice. It was very appealing for me to watch him, and there's something about him that is very attractive. It's who the country is. The country's not Bob Kerrey, graduate of the University of Nebraska Lincoln, that elite school out there in the Midwest. It's Dan Osborn. I don't know. I was invited to go out to a SEAL Team Foundation fundraiser in California, and stupid me, and I've got many examples of stupid me. They had on the wall, all the SEALs have been killed since, I don't know, 67 or something like that. 90% enlisted. 90%. No, I knew the officers were dog shit because I was one. But my God, and that's Dan Osborn. He's on, he symbolizes all those enlisted guys on the wall.
That's right.
It's quite. Go back to what I said. None of those guys are efficient. There's no efficiency about those enlisted guys that are signing up and doing the work. Oh, you found them not doing anything on a Saturday? They're ready. I don't.
I'm glad you put it that way, because I've tried to explain to people in the past, to civilians, what's the difference between enlisted and officers? And I say, well, it's kind of like union and management. And, my father was union for a long time and then went management. My brother has been union for almost 30 years. But when you describe it like that and you break down Dan's fit into that construct, I think it's really important. Like, they don't have working people there. And the way he spoke was so real and authentic. And Nebraska has become like ground zero for independence now, right? What is it about Nebraska that represents the best of America?
If I was in the Senate today, I would introduce legislation to repeal the tax exempt status of churches, because the churches have taken over politics in Nebraska. When I said it's a religious, I listen to these guys. I'm the devil. Honestly, that's the devil. He's the devil. It's Satan. It's the Antichrist or whatever. It's a religion. And I have no problem with people who are religious, not at all. But now that's what's dominating politics. It's the political views of people who, read the Bible every day and think that's where the ultimate truth is. Like J.D. Vance. That's my history. You want to know my history? Not Johnson said it, actually. Our speaker. Read the Bible. How about Leviticus, you nitwit? How's that book working out for you? They thought the world was flat at that time. They thought that, that we revolved around everybody. We got a different understanding of our universe today than when this book was written. And it's dominant in Nebraska. It's a dominant force. It's not 100%, but it's a big fraction. And this because you come to people like me and ask me to write checks. Now Senator, then Governor Ricketts and his family have put a ton of money into everything that runs as a Republican. And lately we had a ballot initiative to codify a little bit of Roe v. Wade to provide some freedom, not extreme. It was a moderate, and Ricketts bought and paid for an initiative that had an amendment that looked very much like the same thing, and it wasn't. And they carried the day. So we're going to have an extreme restriction on women in Nebraska if they want to plan their pregnancy and deal with the pregnancy afterwards. So it's the Ricketts money have a huge impact in Nebraska. So anyway, that's
Bob. I want to ask you, first of all, you're going to stick around for some extra questions for our Patreon members. Thank you to you guys for fueling this kind of content. Now you understand why Bob's voice is so important always, but especially now. You were on the 9/11 Commission. You came and spoke virtually to my class at Amherst when I was teaching a course on the history of 9/11. It feels like we're living in a moment where Osama bin Laden is smiling from hell. He would be happy to see us divided, to have a president who attacks the FBI and a Department of Defense that's ripping itself apart. Can you talk about this moment in relation to that and the findings and that threat to our everything? And what we can learn maybe now as we face a different existential threat that comes from the president?
Well, I don't. First of all, hell is one of the worst inventions of humanity. To invent a hell, and I don't know who did that, but it's a terrible decision. And then we've adopted it. Heaven and hell. My God, and Bin Laden believed in heaven and hell. So. Yeah, he believed he was going to heaven as a consequence of planning this attack. I think there's no question we've overreacted. There was so much unity right afterwards. I mean, the Yankees got cheered in Boston.
Yeah,
they got cheered. Yankees don't get cheered in Boston, but they did. I was here, and you'd see somebody and say, it's good to see you. And you actually meant it because you didn't know if you were going to be able to see it. I can't see a fireman today. I can't see anybody in the emergency business in New York City and think about it the same way.
Yeah.
They didn't check with Elon to find out if it was an approved thing to do, to run down to those buildings and race up to try to save people and die in a terrible way. It's still moving, and the museum that they finally built is wonderful because it does show the ideology. It does show, there's a group of people who crossed the line. They decided, not only do I disagree with America's foreign policy, I'm going to kill Americans. And if you do that, you're not long for the world. We don't need to have a major war. We don't have to have a crusade against people who believe that. But we've got plenty of people that know how to. If you publicly say today that you're going to kill Americans because you disagree with their policy in Israel, their policy in wherever, you're going to meet the United States government, and you're either going to be prosecuted for it, or an extremist. If that doesn't work, you're going to die. It's a different world today. Oh my God, we do, and we behave differently as a consequence. But it's not a crusade. The guy, when I get finished with the surgery, I'm gonna start walking at a prosthetic. I love this story. I think I told you the story. The guy who's building my prosthetic, his name is Omar. He's a Muslim from Egypt. His parents immigrated here, and he and I are collaborating. My leg is going to be made by Omar, the Muslim. I said, shit, this is okay with me. He's not threatening my life. He's helping me live my life. So I think personally, I think that's the right attitude. It's not easy to do, because you run into political correctness. I mean, poor England, they're going down the toilet because they couldn't figure it out. You come to our country, you come to the United States of America, you go through the naturalization process. I used to do them when I was at the New School. They're so moving, except for that fucking Lee Greenwood song they played every time. But nonetheless, people from all over the world waving the American flag. They get it. They don't become French, they become Americans. It's so I have not abandoned the sort of the underlying idea, especially today. Paul, this is the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. He was born today in 1809. And there's a hero. And by the way, there's a man who understood power and understood what this country is. The Gettysburg Address still puts tears in my eyes. It's a spectacular, short, and I think changed the purpose of the country. We didn't talk about freedom in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. And that's what and I think that is what makes America great. I'm yakking on too long. I can't.
No, I've told you for years, this is what I want to do, is just kind of hit the button and let you talk for an hour every week. And just record it and put it out to America. So maybe this is a teaser for the Bob Kerrey show. It's coming soon.
I could see your eyes glazing over as I was.
Not at all, man. I have one last question for you.
Okay. All right.
And then we'll bring it back again, I hope soon. You now have a Navy ship coming online that will be named after you. You told me this and we talked about it yesterday, but can you talk about that and what it means, and maybe what it means, for a kid growing up in Nebraska to see this whole life line, the line of your life, which is so incredible and continues to be incredible. Can you just talk about that as you face, all these health issues and this kind of crisis of our democracy in America? I think that ship is a reminder of a great American story, and it's yours.
Yeah, but you and I talked about, to tell you, happiness is a choice. And if you're in the United States of America and you're unhappy, you need ketamine. I don't know. You need something other than you need to adjust your little brain. So Del Toro, secretary, called and said, how do you feel about naming a ship after me? And I said, is it a trawler? What is it? Because it matters. No, it's a DDG. It's a guided missile, Harley class guided missile destroyer. It's a phenomenal ship. It's $2.5 billion sticker price. There's only 2 builders left. So I'm not sure I couldn't knock it out with a couple thousand drones, but regardless, it's a beautiful boat. And so the first question is, you got 48 hours. I need an answer to 2 questions. The first one is, what name? My name is Joseph Robert, and I call Bob. Well, Bob seems a little low class, so they put Robert on the boat. And now I need a sponsor, and it has to be a female, has to be a woman. And it's one of the great things that about all the U.S. Armed Services. There's a story. We didn't just spring out of the head of somebody on Fox News. The military's been around a long, and they got stories, some good ones, some bad ones. And you know the difference between a fairy tale and a war story, right? All right. Fairy tale always starts once upon a time, and a war story always begins, no shit, this is true, I was there, right? Well, so I get to pick, and I called, and she said yes. The widow, one of the finest SEAL team operators that I knew, and she's going to be the sponsor of the boat. So whenever the champagne is cracked on the hull, she's going to be the one standing up there, and she's going to have a special permanent status for the USS Robert Kerrey. It opens up the tradition. When I wasn't in the Navy. You were in the, I was in the United States Navy. And it's a big difference between the United States Navy and the French Navy, the Lebanese. We are the United States of America. It means a lot. So it's, I think that little boat's worth $2.5 billion, by the way.
I'm glad it's not a trawler.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see your speech at the christening. And I'm so grateful that you finally came on the show. I'm also so grateful for all your support for me personally, for all the work I've been doing for so many decades.
What's on that shelf right behind you? It looks like
this is it's a Mets, it's a Darryl Strawberry bobblehead, and a Vin Scully bobblehead, and some Mets and Jets shit, because it's all Connell stuff.
Got it.
What did it look like?
It looked like two gay guys sitting on a ledge. I didn't.
Oh my! Well, it could be.
I didn't have any idea what was back there.
Well, you are awesome, Bob. I hope you'll come back again. You're going to stick around for a couple extra questions.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Thank you for being a conscience for this country, a voice of true patriotism, and one of the coolest guys I know. I mean, you're also a very interesting and cool guy that teaches us, about keeping it real and speaking from the heart. And we need that.
And by the way, Paul, you know that I'm speaking truth when I say to you that half the time I'm wrong. So one of the great things about aging out is you realize, shit, it doesn't, you're not going to die if you're wrong. You're going to die if you can't see that you are wrong.
I'm going to leave it with that. Thank you, Bob Kerrey, the great senator, governor, ship. The Robert Kerrey is finally joined us. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Now, thank God we've had the distraction of sports to keep our minds off of this chaos, at least for a couple of hours, a few times a week. And we were hoping for that with the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, like so much of 2025, it was a disappointment. It was a total and complete and painful dismantling of the Chiefs by the Eagles, who showed what it's like to come ready, to hit hard, and to be focused as a team, as one unit. But it was a total dismantling. It kind of looks like what Trump is doing to the Democrats in our government right now. Now, I'm no Eagles fan, but I'm happy for Saquon. And I'm happy for Jalen Hurts. I'm happy for that team because they showed what it's like to work as a unit. And Coach Nick Sirianni said it best after the win when he said, "This is the best team sport there is." I think that's true, except for one other team sport, America. America and democracy are a team sport, and they need everybody involved, now more than ever. Now, of course, I got to talk about Kendrick Lamar. Massive respect to Kendrick Lamar. It was a history-making performance. Strong, visual, powerful, raw. But I wanted more, especially on this stage and in this moment. Rykoff's recommendation time. I do recommend that you go back and watch Kendrick's performance again and read up on the subtleties that were hidden within it. And, of course, check out his new album. Check out all of Kendrick Lamar's album. Highly recommended. And while you're at it, two other recommendations. Check out the fantastic Jeep commercial that aired. It was really the most unifying and patriotic thing we saw throughout the entire Super Bowl. Unfortunately, it was an ad for a car, but nonetheless, I recommend you check out that fantastic Jeep Super Bowl that had the line that said, "You don't have to be friends to wave at somebody." And that's an important message now. And another Rykoff's recommendation, if you missed it, go back and check out the NFL Flag Football for Girls ad, produced and directed by guest on this show, my friend, the great Pete Berg. If you've never seen that episode, go back and check out my conversation with Pete Berg, where we talked about another Super Bowl commercial he made. But Pete Berg has done it again with the best Super Bowl commercial of the entire year and a fantastic message. I continue to encourage everybody, especially girls, to check out Flag Football. Some quick thank yous. I want to thank my friend Connell McShane on News Nation. Look for me there every Wednesday in the 3 o'clock hour as we break down the latest on national security and politics. And Stephanie Rule. Thanks to Stephanie Rule and the MSNBC crew for having me on the Nightcap last Friday night. If you missed that, it's linked in the bio and on our YouTube page, where if you're not subscribed yet, you should right now. Subscribe to Independent Americans on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever you are listening and watching now. And be sure to go to independentamericans.us, where you can join our Patreon community. Patrons, you help keep this content going. Thank you for having our back. You're going to get exclusive extra content with Bob Kerrey. You got a heads up that he was our guest, and you will continue to get behind the scenes looks at all that we do. Be sure to follow me on social media. Send us your feedback. Look for the helpers. Shout out any of the helpers that you've got. And give us a call. You can leave us a voicemail message. You can even leave us a video. The number is 317-721-1718. That's 317-721-1718. Give us a shout out. Let me know what you think of this conversation with Bob Kerrey or any of our recent episodes. Tell me the helpers you're looking out for, and even make your recommendation, and maybe I'll read it on the air in an upcoming show. Yep, times are crazy, but they're also full of independents, because independents are the future. And we are not alone in our independence. More folks are declaring their independence every single day. Remember, independents are now the majority. We are the largest voting bloc in America, more than the Democrats, more than the Republicans. And we are the future. Light over heat, country over party, and people over politics. Busting up the status quo and building a new movement that provides strength, integrity, hope, and most of all, independence. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Bob Kerrey. If you did, share it far and wide and invite others to declare their independence now. And stay vigilant, my friends, especially now, because vigilance is the price of freedom. And hope is still the oxygen of democracy. So don't lose hope. It'll help us all stay vigilant. And know you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant, and we're all in this together. I'm your host, Paul Rykoff. Thank you for listening. Down with Hamas. Down with Putin, now more than ever. Slava Ukraine, now more than ever. And stay vigilant, America, now more than ever. And happy Valentine's Day. Whew. See you soon.
Powered by Righteous Media.